Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Undiluted Word. I am Dara, your host. This is actually our 5th episode. So yeah, whoop, whoop. Once again, I'm joined by my very good friend Panashe.
Hi everybody, hi, I'm back.
And for those of you who were with us on the last episode on Moods on the Loose, you would have already heard about emotional intelligence. Today we are going to carry on with the same sort of theme. Particularly loving the unlovables. We hope that this episode you'll find it encouraging, enlightening, and educating. As Christians, being united or unity is a very important principle that we are meant to incorporate in our lives, and it requires effort. So in this episode, we'll be going through practical steps on how we can actually do this and love the people who we find unlovable in life. So Panashe will start us off with a nice little quote.
So the quote today is, in order to master compassion, you have to spend time getting to know monsters. When you can do that, you will see that there are no monsters, only people that acted like monsters because no one gave them the time or compassion to hear their story. And that's by Shannon L. Alder.
Wow.
Monsters.
Yeah, that's the word that fucked out to me as well. I was like,
whoa. But like she said, nobody is a monster.
Yeah.
It's just a person who hasn't been given the time or compassion they need to tell their story and be heard.
So before that part, there will be a monster for sure. But I feel like we in life we do have things like that, and it's very true. And I really liked how it said like you basically need to be able to understand them. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of maybe monsters in our lives, what sort of traits or characteristics rub you up the wrong way?
I think that people who are not self-aware about how their vibe is affecting the people around them. People who get offended really quickly. And people who are always determined to be right. Like that really irritates me. At the cost of disrupting the peace. Like they will do what it takes. They will set off an atomic bomb just so that their rightness can be proven and justified. I'm not a fan of that.
No, that's very annoying.
Yeah.
So, and another question I've got for you actually, do you think there are any traits that you have maybe that rub people up the wrong way?
So yeah, I'm the kind of person, or at least I used to be, God, the Lord is working on my heart, who would be like, there'd be something blatantly wrong with me. And then somebody asked me, oh, are you all right? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm like, well, firstly, you don't sound fine. And then they asked me like 3 or 4 times, and I would still profess to be fine when it was a lie. So I don't like a poor communication. That is definitely something that I can have. Because it's a lot of the times when I'm just angry or frustrated. I'm also somebody who, and I think a lot more people do this than they realize, but I'm also somebody who would not let go of the tension of a situation. So I apologize, the other person apologizes. And to be honest, we both mean it. But there was just something in my body that would like still be mad. I can't let go of the negative emotion.
Yeah.
And a big part of dealing with difficult people, as we'll see, is like the ability to let go. But I just could not let go. Like I say could, as if everything's in my past. I have my bad days, I have my good days. True. Yeah. What about you?
In terms of like traits, I think, I don't know, it's always like a good and bad thing, to be honest. You know how very energetic and bubbly, I feel like sometimes that can come across as being a lot, like too much, and just always in people's faces, or just trying to be like, oh, what's going on? What do you want us to do? And some people don't like that. But I feel like just always wanting to be with people and maybe some people might not actually want that. Like some people do still want that respect of their space. So
Yeah.
as I become more aware of that, I'm able to see, okay, what does this person actually want? But yeah, I think these sort of questions are very important for us to also ask, because it's very easy for us to say, yeah, we've met people, interacted with people that have driven us mad, and we may want to call them monsters, like the quote said. They've annoyed us or just simply difficult to relate with. But then we also need to realize that sometimes we could be the monsters in people's stories, villains, you could say as well. Yeah, and it's just almost inevitable, because you're not always going to get along with everyone you meet, and that's just because we're all so varied and different. So of course there's going to be a bit of tension sometimes, but I think it's very important that even though we don't get along with everyone, doesn't mean then we should go about behaving anyhow and bulldozing our way through life, hurting other people, because as I said earlier, unity is so important in terms of being a Christian and leading like a good life.
Definitely.
All right, so having said those questions and sort of discussed the intro to this topic, we'll get straight into it in terms of discussing how to love these unlovable people in our lives. And so what we've been able to do is come up with a few points that will just illustrate to you and also give examples from our personal experiences, and just to show how maybe we've been able to deal with it, whether positively or negatively as well, what we've learned from those circumstances. A key text that sort of embodies a lot of what we are going to be talking about is found in Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. It reads, "Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection." Yes, I think that's a really good text to really sum up exactly what it means to be able to love the unlovables. And as I said, we'll go into the different points about that. All right, so the first point that we have got is don't be offended. You're probably wondering, what do you mean, don't be offended? They've hurt me and they've done something that is clearly stupid or you don't like, and they're moving like a monster. So I should be offended and I'm going to take it personally. However, if you take every single thing that people do around you personally, you always be very unhappy. As I've said earlier, there are bound to be people you meet that you simply just don't get along with. And if you're going to go around collecting all that anger from how people are treating you, you walk around being a very unhappy person, and that also affects your relationship with other people. Or I've tend to realize in terms of dealing with people that have maybe upset me or annoyed me, is that sometimes they are going through things themselves, and that is maybe why they're acting the way they are acting, and they're just revealing maybe the hurt or pain that they have gone through. And so when I'm able to see, okay, they're moving like this, I don't really like it, I'm able to try and see, okay, why is it that the person is acting like this? And I think there's a Bible text in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 16, and it says, "When a fool is annoyed, he quickly lets it to be known. Wise people will ignore an insult." And I think when it talks about being wise here, it's saying wise people are able to look past the behavior that the person is exhibiting and see, okay, maybe there's something more to the way they're acting and why they're acting that way. And I think sometimes when you're able to actually understand someone's background, it makes it easier to then like let something slide. You have better understanding of maybe why they are acting the way they're acting.
It's just like putting yourself in that person's shoes for even like 10 seconds. Because I think the Bible text that you mentioned in Proverbs 12, that's saying fools are let it quick to be known when they're angry, but a wise person ignores it. I think there's something that's really reactive about offense. Like it's that instant sinking feeling that like, oh, somebody's like come for me, they've disrespected me, they've come at me. And it really revolves around yourself. And that's really like instinctive. But if you just even step back for 10 seconds and look at that person externally, maybe you'll see that, oh, actually, they're snapping at me because there are 10 other people asking for them to do something, or their senior has treated them very disrespectfully and rudely, or they've had a hard interaction with somebody today. So yeah, like, we're not saying that we need to know like the origin stories of the monsters in our lives, but just put the interaction into context, the larger picture. Because I think a lot of that instinctive offense revolves around you thinking like, how dare somebody disrespect me, like, do you know who I am? And it's good to have that energy. Like, you don't want somebody to, you shouldn't stand for disrespect like regularly. I think it's important that you stick up for yourself, but you can't just spend every other moment being like, and then he said this and I fought back, because it's just going to make your life so unnecessarily difficult. You're putting roadblocks in your path unnecessarily when life already has enough roadblocks to give to you.
Another Bible text in Proverbs chapter 10 verse 12 reads, "Love overlooks the wrongs that others do." And I really think that with that, the more love you have in your heart, the harder it is for people to offend you, because they do something that's like, oh, why are you doing that? But because of the love that you have in your heart, you're able to sort of overlook it and not let it affect you so deeply, then it affects how you then interact with them or other people around you. So I've got a question for you. What are some methods you can use to keep yourself from being offended when someone that is difficult tries to insult you or upset you?
Something that I'm learning is to not take myself so seriously. I think a lot of our offense is linked to our ego and the preservation of like our identity as like a person who contributes, who's upstanding. And so when somebody disrespects us or treats us harshly, that kind of plays with that image we have of ourselves. If we're not taking ourselves seriously, then, you know, I'm just going to laugh it off when you come for me a little bit sideways and leave that problem there and walk away and get on with my day. On that similar note, leaving your problems where they are. You don't have to carry them around with you. If it happens in one room, you leave it in that room, you walk into the next room. And then the last thing is like Bible-based. So Proverbs 4 verse 23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." So some of you might know that biblically your heart is the seat of your emotions and your affections, and it determines how you deal with different situations. But the problem with our heart, especially when we're not with, or we don't have a strong relationship with God, is that our heart doesn't want to be guarded, which is maybe why God has to reinforce it in a commandment. Our heart actually wants to loudly express itself about all its opinions. It wants to vocalize every single feeling. It wants to be heard. But the Bible never says that we have to express, or we should even express everything in our heart. It just says guard it. And we know what it's like when somebody complains about every single thing that's happened to them. Their kids woke them up early. They were late into work because of their kids somehow. Let me not disrespect people, because I don't have any children, so I don't know what, that's not my battle. Ooh, battle.
Now other battles.
But you know, we know what it feels like to be around somebody who is just like vomiting every single thought and emotion, and how kind of like that aura is just like tumultuous, like it makes us uncomfortable and unsteady. And Proverbs is telling us like, you need to be careful about what you let out, because something that's guarded is not something that lets things enter tightly so it doesn't get offended easily. And then the opposite, it doesn't let things out easily so it doesn't just word vomit at the first opportunity. So some of those are the ways. What about you?
I think it was I really liked how you said about obviously the heart in terms of guarding it, because I think there's another Bible text that says the heart is deceitful. And so if it's deceitful, that means we can't trust every emotion that we claim or think that we have. That means that sometimes I'm feeling angry, and it's just like, really, are you really angry? Like, is that actually the root cause of your emotion? And as we said like earlier in terms in the previous episode about using an emotional will to sort of actually determine what's the emotion that you're actually experiencing. and also maybe talking to other people about it in a way that they can then help you affirm, okay, yeah, this is, you have a right to feel like this. And then actually, not that you're trying to get acceptance or get some sort of like clarification that, yeah, this is how you're feeling. But I guess if you have someone that you can hold, that can hold you accountable, it's like, oh, I'm feeling this type of way because this is what they did to me. They're going to be able to also help you see from another person's perspective. Yeah, and I think that's how maybe sometimes I stop myself from being so offended with what people do or say to me. I can either I sometimes speak to you about it, to be honest, or I speak to my mum and I'm like, okay, this is what happened, blah 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 blah, and we try and go through it in like a logical manner to see, okay, is there anything I have missed because of how emotional I want to be about the situation?
I feel like you made a good point as well about the emotions that your heart brings forward are not always like the best ones for the situation. I think like sometimes we have to remember that our emotions and our feelings aren't always necessarily working in our good, like in our best good. We're not necessarily living in our highest self when we're calling or listening to those emotions. They're just kind of like the instinctual, like basic instincts. But sometimes you have to step out of yourself and rationalize before you act. And it's confusing because you're like, well, surely something that's inside of me is right, but not always. If that was the case, then there'd be a lot fewer problems.
Honestly.
Yeah.
So as you sort of already alluded to in terms of doing having like a Bible study and really helping yourself stay grounded, that moves on to our second point, which is about pursuing personal peace. In that key text that we're looking at in Colossians chapter 3 verse 15 now, it says, and let the peace of God rule in your hearts. That sort of talks about an important piece of the puzzle in terms of pursuing personal peace. Because if you're at peace with yourself, when people want to move like a monster and come with disruptive ways into your sort of sphere, you're able to be like, no, you let that peace that God has also given you rule in your hearts. And I really like that phrase in terms of like, let God's peace rule your hearts, because then, as we just said earlier, your heart needs to be guarded. And if it's guarded by God's peace, this peace that passes understanding, like we know already in the Bible, it means that even when people are moving like monsters and you don't really understand why they're moving like that, and you've tried to maybe gain more understanding, if you have your peace in something like God, or you let God grant you peace, it means that even if you never get to the bottom of why the person is moving the way they are, because as you said, you're never going to get a whole episode about this is why this person is going to shout at you or get annoyed at you for doing this. Because of that peace, it doesn't even matter anymore. You're just going to be at peace with yourself, and peace with yourself is probably one of the most important things to have, because then people do crazy stuff around you, just look at them like, okay, cool, side eye, move on. So I think there are like really practical ways to pursue peace, like you said, Bible study, doing plans even about, or Bible plans specifically about whatever it is you're going through, and just having that time to be still, and whether it's meditation or listening to music, something that just makes you calm. I think that's the best way in terms of moving forward after something negative has happened.
So I've been reading this book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by somebody called Richard Carlson. And in terms of pursuing peace, one of his tips is you should lower your tolerance to stress. So a lot of us feel like in order to be successful, I mean, that kind of attitude where it's like, you don't sleep until you die, or
imagine.
Do you know what I mean? Or people who are just like, nah, I'm in my grinding phase, that kind of thing. So a lot of us feel like we need to be able to cope with massive amounts of stress and like being overworked and overtired and exhausted. And that's going to be the key to us being able to cope with more stress. Which just, when you say it out loud, it doesn't make sense. But that's what I'm saying, guys. Your emotions don't make sense sometimes. But if you're raising the level of amount of stress that you can tolerate, then you're just going to be stressed more often, because it means you're going to be like pushing yourself deeper and deeper into that hole. So the book recommends that you start noticing stress and conflict early, when your mind isn't moving as quickly and when things still feel somewhat in control. And the moment you catch it, you just need to relax, take a few breaths, and go for like a short walk. And we've all been there, like when you're in uni and you're about to do exams and stuff, and like you have a 24-hour day, and you say to yourself, I don't have time to have a break, I don't have time to go and have a walk. And you're like, well, no, actually, when you're starting to feel that way, that's the most appropriate time, because your revision's not even going. It's like there's a gate in front of your head, and the knowledge is not being absorbed anymore. So I would recommend reducing your tolerance to stress and stressful people, stressful situations.
Yeah, that's lovely. So yeah, just to reiterate the points that we've said in terms of pursuing personal peace, is that the key to developing peace in the relationships around us is to develop peace within ourselves first. We are responsible for our own internal peace. Critics or like gossipers, they're not happy people. That is clear that they're not happy people. There are things that are within them that are clearly upsetting them, and so they feel the need to be very critical about other people, or want to always gossip because they think that's what's going to give them joy. And so once again, people that are always ready to stir up conflict and just like always be out there building tension in relationships, they do that because they don't necessarily have peace within themselves. And so as people that have peace or are pursuing peace, you have no desire to want to stir things up and to go and attack someone because you think that's going to give you some sort of, I don't know, like adrenaline rush, and it's just not needed. So if you always feel as though maybe people are disappointing you, or if you feel like people are doing more wrong things than right things, and there's always something to complain about, or you feel like people are always getting on your nerves, and or you're just noticing other things in other people, sometimes I think it's good for us to just take a step back and think, what's the source of why I feel as though everybody else around me is like problematic? And then maybe we can trace that to the fact that we aren't at peace with ourselves, or aren't really experiencing the peace of God. Because once we have that peace of God within our hearts, we're going to lose all interest in sort of conflict and the desire to be judgmental about how other people are moving, and like stop being so on edge, which I think is what leads to so much conflict as well. So we'll move on swiftly to the next point, which is don't hold grudges.
Woo!
This is a random question, but I'm still going to ask it. How quickly do you think you forgive someone?
Oh, see, whilst I was preparing, I realized that it takes a lot for me to get to the point where I'm in conflict with people. Like, I'm not confrontational at all. But once I'm in conflict with you, I probably will cut you. Oh, no, I will not cut you off. But I am very slow to forgive from that point forward, because part of me is like, how dare you get me to this place where we're not in unity with one another. So it's getting better, but yeah, I'm not the fastest person to be like, oh, it's okay, like we can move on.
Even if I say it, I'm lying. If I say it so quickly, like, yeah. And there's the thing, okay, I remember there was a quote that said resentment, or basically holding grudges, is like drinking poison and hoping it kills the other person. And I was just like, ooh. It's so true though, because like I think sometimes we just really want to be upset and have our chance to be upset at what the person has done. But then that period of being upset and angry and furious about what's happened, we let it go on for a bit longer than obviously God intends for us to keep it for. And which at the end of the day, that turns into resentment. And sometimes resentment is because you haven't decided to maybe speak about it, and it's something that's been playing on your mind. It's so true what that quote says, that we are doing more damage to ourselves than the other person. And sometimes these monsters, I like that term, so I'm going to keep using it. These like people that have obviously frustrated us, they just carry on living their lives sometimes, and they don't even know that they've offended you. You've decided to be offended, and as a result, you are now moving around upset about it. You're even talking to other people about it, and before you know it, they're now in control of your life. They are the topic of all your discussions. every time someone talks to you, you're always talking about it, and before you know it, this person is now ruling more of your life than they should have in the first place. And I'm even talking from a place of like experiencing that, because there've been times when I've obviously been upset about what people have done to me, and in the whole sort of arrangement of trying to understand it, I've maybe been talking about it, and before you know it, I realize I haven't actually forgiven them, because if I've decided to forgive them, I would have more peace about the situation and not necessarily let it continue to upset me far longer than it should have like been a problem in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. Truth be told, I don't like having to say things like this, but I think that men/boys are actually a lot better of letting things go than we as ladies can be. Because we I think some of us, we egg each other on to stay mad.
Oh my God, yes.
Oh my
Yeah, they
goodness.
did that
Like,
bad thing. Yeah. Instigating it.
exactly. We're like, you stay mad, you deserve. Whereas guys, like, have always been the kind of people who are maybe they will actually get into legitimate conflict, but then the next day they'll be playing football together. And I find it fascinating. Like, maybe it's one of the few times we should take a book out of their leaf, a leaf out of their book, even. Yeah, because I think a lot of us, I've experienced it with my own friends, my small sample size. Um, but yeah, like, I know myself and I know my friends, like, sometimes when we get into conflicts with people, we can barely even push out the words "I'm sorry." Like, it's not like we even say them, enunciate them properly. We're like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry."
My sister.
Like, yeah. Oh my goodness. Like somebody's put like sort of a muzzle on us. And we can't speak English anymore. So yeah, like, saying sorry firstly wholeheartedly, so that when you do say it, like, you are truly ready to move on.
Yeah.
Because yeah, as you said, you're just drinking the poison and expecting
really
the other person to be hurt.
Yeah. Once again, in that key text that we had read in Colossians chapter 3, verse 13, it says, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. In another translation, it says, you must make allowances for each other's faults and forgive the person who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. So whenever I've been in those circumstances where I'm just like, no, you upset me, and I'm gonna wait for you to apologize before I even think about forgiving you. I'm just like, looking back now, I'm just like, really?
Yeah, definitely.
There was this quote by C.S. Lewis. I always remember it when it comes to like forgiving people, and it literally says, forgive the inexcusable in others because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you.
Ooh.
And so when I realized that, I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, there's so many things that I've done, whether hidden or open for everyone to see, and God has forgiven me because of that. And if he's able to forgive me, I should be a bit more lenient in terms of forgiving other people as well.
I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's also important to manage your expectations of other people. Because a lot of us have been in conflicts with people and we're invested in the outcome. And whilst we're like maybe configuring our apology, we're like, oh, it's going to be such a great apology. We're going to be best friends afterwards. We're going to just, everything will be okay. You know what I mean? And then the situations we get there, and maybe the person who we are sincerely apologizing to and trying to work things out with will continue to have a bit of a screw face. They're going to continue to give us the cold shoulder. People won't always act the way we want them to or expect them to. And that of course runs the opposite way. Like, I am not always going to run like behave in the way that people expect me to or would want me to. So even if we imagine like the best reconciliation, we have to like accept reality as it comes. And sometimes that's not a nice feeling, but it's part of being an adult.
It really is.
We've all met people who are like chronically bitter. And so when I say that, I kind of just mean people who, like Dara said, like every conversation they have is filled with them recalling stories from their childhood or their adolescence of how people have wronged them. And that is why they are where they are. And if these things just had not happened,
well, they did.
Yeah, they did. But if they had just not happened, they would be like a successful superstar. And the reality is, I think for some people, letting go of their pain or other unpleasant emotions is difficult because that bitterness and those negative stories, which were the reality, but are no longer the reality, become part of their identity. So without all of that pain, they're like, I don't know who I am without, knowing that someone stole my sabza when I was 15 and I was hungry for one meal. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I can understand if that's the story you've been telling yourself for years, and that's why you truly believe you haven't gotten where you want to be, why you unwilling to let go of it. But it's, once again, just putting roadblocks in your life.
Yeah. Drinking the poison. I've got a text in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 to 31, which I'm sure a lot of people are already familiar with, but I will just read it again in our hearing. Luke 6, verse 27 to 31 reads, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully use you. To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, and do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise." Love your enemies, and a lot of other things were said in that passage.
Let them take your clothes, don't ask for them back.
Give the tunic as well.
Isn't the reality of like how we're called to love in the Bible so radical? Because me, like, I'm like, yeah, you can have some of my food as long as there's enough for me, so I'm not, hungry or don't have to go cook again. Yeah, like, it's just what we're called to do is, you can't be done without the Holy Spirit.
Definitely. I think that's a lot harder. Obviously, the concept there is clear. It's telling you to love your enemies and goes through those descriptive ways in which we can do that. But it's when you're in a stage where you've been hurt by someone and you've been like, they frustrated you to the extent that you're just like, I've gotten to the stage where someone has done so many things. I'm just like, God, and you say this is your child. How? And for me, it's just like one thing that I always have in the back of my mind now when dealing with situations like this is that God should help me see this person who is basically his child through his own eyes, because when I'm able to see that person, either male or female, through God's eyes, I'm able to hopefully be a bit more loving, and it will be a bit easier to actually show compassion and kindness to them, because I don't think it's something that just comes naturally, especially when you're coming from a place of being hurt and going through all those negative emotions. It's just like, no, why can't I just go and hit them and be okay with that? Like, I want to start a fight. But the Bible even says, blessed are the peacemakers. It's not the troublemakers, the ones that want to be fighting everyone. So yeah, so for that, I'm literally always like, God, help me see this person through your eyes and help me show love onto them. And he will actually be able to then like show you how to be more loving towards that person.
And I think, like you were saying, like how the kind of like effort you have to put in behind loving somebody who you just disagree with them, like on a human level, you just don't get it. The kind of love the Bible tells you to have for them, like that's not the kind of love that is demonstrated to us regularly. Like when we look around, we see people in love and in friendships and stuff, and we just kind of, I don't know, because of how we portray ourselves, we assume that it's just easy love, like it's effortless, and there's like a bit of a false illusion that's given. We don't get to see the conflict behind the scenes. We don't get to see the fact that some days you just don't feel like loving people, but you have to kind of display that consistency and effort. Like true love will continue to love when it doesn't feel like this. Like feel like doing it all the time. It's gonna love people when they've treated them wrong. Like that kind of effortful love. It's difficult, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, it is. Because it just gives you a better life, man, and a better quality of life, which is what God essentially wants for us as well. Lovely. So we've basically talked about not holding grudges and being able to be forgiven towards other people. The next point is don't play tit for tat. I'm just going to hold my hands up right now and say, I can be so, so petty. I can be so, so petty that someone does something to me. I'm just like, you know, I'm going to do worse than that. You think you're cool? You think it's only you? I'm going to do worse than that. I will show you pepper. It's not good. It's not.
It's not.
There's a Bible text I've even got here, actually. Proverbs 26, verse 21. It says, just as charcoal and wood keep a fire going, a quarrelsome person keeps an argument going.
Do not fuel the fire. Don't add fuel to it. And I think like being, like you said, being petty is not good, guys. It's not. Because the word petty like denotes that you're making a big thing out of things that are actually kind of small anyway. Take the high road and choose your battles wisely, because if you're being petty, you're exerting just your minimal energy on small things when you could be conserving it for the bigger trials that are to come.
Being petty is not a fruit of the spirit.
It's not.
Really not. I think we even do it in very, very subtle ways, like gossiping. You just fall into it sometimes without realizing. And it just feels good to be able to vent your anger out. But gossiping, when you think of it in itself, it causes more destruction to the relationship than actually building it up. I think there's so many Bible texts even that will just that talks about how gossiping separates close friends and separates close bonds. And furthermore, in the Bible, it even says in 1 Peter 3 verse 9, do not do wrong to repay a wrong, and do not insult to repay an insult, but repay with a blessing, because you yourselves were called to do this so that you might receive a blessing. And I think it's really important for us to remember that last section where it says, so that you might receive a blessing. Remember that all the things that we do aren't just because someone is telling you, oh yeah, do that, and just allow people to walk over you anyhow. But it's literally saying that we need to be more mindful of how we interact with other people, because essentially our reward is in heaven and we will get our blessing eventually, even if we don't feel as though the circumstance or situation is correct and right at the moment. God will eventually avenge for all the wrong that has been done to us, and we don't necessarily have to fight our own battles ourselves. And the ways we do it, they're clearly not like beneficial at all.
No, it's not effective whatsoever. It just makes things worse.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that brings us to like our last point, which you hinted at earlier, which is about taking the high road.
Yeah.
Going back again to that key text in Colossians 3 verse 12, it says, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies. In other texts, it says, clothe yourselves in compassion and kindness. So as we've always sort of hinted at, it's an active thing that you're going to have to do to decide to be a better person. And here it says, as the elect of God, i.e. God has chosen me and you to be something special and to be part of his plan. And this involves us clothing ourselves with these characteristics, which involve being compassionate, being kind, showing humility, and being like long suffering, and being able to bear with each other even when others aren't necessarily treating you in the way that you want them to treat you and they're rubbing you up the wrong way. But it's that effort that you have to be like, do you know what? This is happening, but I'm going to decide to respond in a way that actually pleases God than to respond in a way that the world around me also responds to things like this.
I feel like it's important to remember that if we were always acting based on things that cause the least resistance in our lives, so if it's easiest to be petty and we're always like, I'm going to be petty, I'm not going to take the higher road and do things that's a bit more difficult for me, then we're probably going to get anywhere, because our lowest resistance setting is always kind of like the lazy, self-centered one, the one that doesn't want to reach out to people, the one that doesn't want to apologize, the one that wants to hold a grudge, the one that doesn't want to put in the effort to like achieve your goal for maybe like success in your career or success in relationships or success in even your physical body. Like that the path of least resistance internally might not get you very far. You just end up having achieved not much.
There's actually several Bible texts that still encourage you in this sort of same tone. Romans 12 verse 14, ask God to bless those who persecute you, i.e. those that are monsters, those that are driving you mad. Ask him to bless and not curse. And this shows like real love, being able to love these unlovable people in our lives. And I think I've been able to do that in a way, in terms of like, God, show me how to see this person through your eyes and love them the way that you love them. And that sort of changes me to be like, okay, this is how you can then go in this path and actually want to do what God wants you to do in terms of having these quality relationships. And not every relationship you have with everyone is going to go well. There are some times when things do have to end just because either the conflict now is causing you to be this person that God did not intend for you to be. And it's just like, no, you actually have to then like end those sort of relationships just because it's taking you further from being God's elect. Once again, in Romans 12 verse 21, it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And that really just sums up in itself what it means to be able to just overcome an evil or what other people have done to you with your own good intentions. And at the end of the day, God knows what's in your heart and the other person's heart as well, and we'll be able to just make things work out well in the end. There was this quote from a sermon that I listened to once, and it said, God can't please everyone, so you can't either. And that really stands out to me, because I think sometimes I really want to be able to get along with everyone, but that's sometimes very unrealistic. It is quite a lot of pressure to put that on some circumstances and relationships. And so just having that at the back of your mind, that just so that you don't lose yourself amongst all that's happening around you, do keep those points that we've already talked about in terms of try not to be offended, develop that thicker skin, pursue personal peace, be quick to forgive other people when they've done you wrong, because it helps you more than it even helps the other person. Don't play tit for tat, and always remember to take the high road. So yeah, those are a summary basically of the points that we've discussed. Panashe, do you have any of the undiluted word points to give us?
Work on how quickly you get offended. Just take the time that you need to process your emotions so that you're not jumping into anything too quickly. Because I think a lot of us go with our instincts, and your instincts aren't always on your side. So just pause, whether it's when you're stressed or upset or angry, just pause and think about what your next move is. Don't just throw your body into it. Yeah.
Lovely. My prayer is that we'll all be able to remember these steps and follow them, in terms of being quick to forgive, taking the high road, and pursuing personal peace. And I pray that God's peace will be in our hearts and be able to rule our hearts even when we are in circumstances that seem to be out of our control. I pray that we'll all be able to please God in the way we conduct ourselves with other human beings. And may we all be spiritually and emotionally aware of who we are and become mature humans as well. And help us not to get easily offended, and give us wisdom to handle our relationships with grace. And also to learn to forgive others, because you, God, have forgiven us. Amen.
Amen.
So yeah, thank you very much, Panashe, once again for joining us in this episode. What was the name of the book again that you read, so you can tell people about that?
It's called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Richard Carlson. I'm not getting paid to promote it.
So you guys should check that out. Once again, follow and check out IGTV videos on Instagram, which is the undiluted word _. And I've also added some new songs onto the Spotify playlist, which you can have the link for in the show notes. So yeah, check that out, and we'll be back again with another episode very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Bye.